Let's start with part one. We want to break down the different components of running. What goes into you getting faster, staying injury free, unlocking enjoyment of doing this sport that is ultimately very, very healthy? Well, let's start with this: an understanding, a realization, an acceptance that it is incredibly common for amateur runners and triathletes to experience injuries when they are going on their training journey. You register for a race, you're excited, you start training. But the data suggests that somewhere around 40 to 50% of training marathon runners end up having their training interrupted due to musculoskeletal injury. Triathletes, multi-sport athletes, it's a little less, but it's still around a third, 30% or so of triathletes end up with their training interrupted because of injury. And yet, when you take a step back, the vast majority of training programs and coaches' prescriptions of workouts out there just leverage the same old, tired, classic training programs that have typically been designed around the approach that elite runners take. The only thing that they do is they take these elite runner programs and they dilute the expectations in terms of total weekly mileage or duration, but ultimately still in there, keeping the backbone of the key workouts. You might do a little bit less, but you still have the long run nearly every week, the fartlek workout, that speed play, the tempo run, mild discomfort, and of course, the interval-based runs. And these programs tend to be applied, mostly in the name of tradition, I would argue. And I feel like often without anyone really administering the program, prescribing the program, executing the program, actually pausing and asking just a few really simple questions. Hang on, what are we actually trying to achieve here? I know we're trying to get ready for a race. I know we're trying to run faster, but what are we building here when it comes to Jimmy, Jane, whoever the athlete might be? What actually goes into an amateur runner, not a very, very fast, gifted, time-rich canyon runner, but what goes into helping an amateur runner with lots of other busy things in their life being successful? And also, what are the things that we're seeing as coaches that are the limiters of running performance for amateurs? Those, of course, express themselves typically late in a marathon or running off the bike in a half Ironman or Ironman. Where do athletes fall short? Where do they struggle? What do athletes actually experience that leads to their race performance ultimately being underwhelming? And so I'm going to try and answer these questions in the most simple terms possible. And I'm going to ignore, as I go through this, three very important factors, because it's not part of the conversation, but it is important. And so I'm going to take out three factors that absolutely go into your race day performance. Alrighty? Those three are, number one, fueling and hydrating with exogenous carbohydrates to deliver prime performance. So you need to stay hydrated. You need to make sure that you're adding fuel, particularly in the longer distance racing. So fueling, we're not going to talk about that today, deliberately. The second component that's very, very important is your mindset, how you actually manage pain that's a part of prime performance. How do you actually set the right mindset? That's an important discussion. We're not going to have it today. And then finally, how do you take your fitness and distribute it over the course of the race? In other words, your pacing. Again, critical, I understand, but not a part of this conversation. Instead, we're going to anchor more on the physical preparation. Alrighty, so what goes into running performance from the physical side? Just bear in mind as you listen today, I understand fueling, I understand pacing, I understand mindset. Those are all important to dial in and get right. But what do we need to do in the pure, simple terms around running readiness? Alrighty, so with that in mind, I've identified 5 key components, and these all interlock almost to be your running fabric, who you are as an athlete. There are 5 things that we want to work on as amateur runners, amateur triathletes, to improve your running performance. If you think I've missed one, reach out to us, info@purplepatchfitness.com. Tell us what I'm missing here. I guess I should say, as I'm going to do this, I'm also not talking about technology. I'm going to talk about that at the end of the show. But here are the 5 components. Alrighty? Number 1, cardiovascular conditioning. So that is training your heart, your lungs, your delivery system, so your cardiovascular system that goes all the way out, building your aerobic engine so that you can sustain effort and process negative byproducts that emerge from you doing the activity. Cardiovascular conditioning, very, very simple. You need to train the heart. This is an endurance discipline and the whole cardiovascular system. And as we go down from the heart pumping, delivering out all the way through to gas exchange that's occurring in the capillaries, that is a critical component of training to becoming a better endurance athlete and therefore, aka a better runner. We need to train the heart. Fantastic. Number 2, the second component, muscular resilience. Training your muscles to handle the load of the longer efforts, especially under fatigue. It's a big part of it. As you're running off the bike, you are going to start your half marathon several hours into the race. You're going to start your Ironman many hours into the race. When you're doing your marathon, you need to be able to maintain form mechanically at mile 20, 21, 22, all the way to 26. So training your muscles, your prime movers that generate propulsion, training them to handle the load of longer efforts. That's a second component. And it's important for the sake of this discussion to separate those out. Heart and lungs, let's call it that, muscles. Those are our first 2 components. The third element, and it's nuanced, but it's slightly different, is what I would label tissue durability. Alrighty, so that's about strengthening and improving the integrity of your tendons, your ligaments, your bones, so that you reduce injury risk and you can increase your training capacity. When an athlete absorbs or executes too much training load relative to their musculoskeletal system being able to effectively absorb it, things break, they get injured. When an athlete ramps training load too quickly, so goes week 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, bang, bam, 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 very, very quickly, things break, they get injured. So tissue durability is different than muscular resilience. So now we have 3 components. You've got heart and lungs, you've got muscles, you've got tendons, ligaments, okay, bones. That's tissue durability. That's what we're going to label this. The third element is your economy of your movement. Now, if you're an automobile, that's like your miles per gallon. Can you improve your running efficiency through frequency, through improved motor patterns, in other words, neurological conditioning and technical development? That's a really important component because at any given pace, can we reduce the physiological cost? If you're a car, it's fine-tuning the engine to get more miles per gallon. That's why I like to use that energy. So economy of movement is a really important component. And then finally, generally just biomechanics and form. Optimizing your own individual, and we all have your own individual stride and movement patterns to prevent breakdown and to maximize your effort, giving a speed return. Slightly different than economy of movement, okay, which is just about lowering cost, if you want to think about it in those terms. Biomechanics and form is maximizing speed and ensuring that you're not having mechanical breakdown, therefore injury risk, and in conjunction, hand in hand, making sure that you're not getting injured. So you're getting more improvement in that, okay? So these are the 5 components that we build the conversation around. Let's just label it off one more time because it's important as we go through this discussion that you remember them. Heart and lungs, cardiovascular conditioning, muscular resilience, staying power for the length of the running journey. Number 3, tissue durability, making sure that your body doesn't break down, your tendons, muscles, and ligaments. Number 3, reducing cost. Okay, so economy of movement. And finally, number 4, biomechanics and form. Those are the elements. You can think about it in many ways if you want to improve your running. Those are your pillars that should inform our thinking when it comes to building training programs. Okay, and this is a gateway to think about. That's what should inform any coach's thinking as we go through that. So as we lead to part 2 here, then we say, okay, if those are the components of running, what are the limiters? Where do you, an amateur runner, tend to go wrong? Where does performance decline occur? Where does frustration emerge? What are the limiters? If we throw a blanket, what goes wrong? For triathletes running off the bike longer distance, or for runners when they break down? Well, if you have ever experienced a marathon run off the bike in an Ironman, or if you've ever experienced the last few miles of a standalone marathon, perhaps you've been right in that very, very painful part, chasing towards the finish at mile 9 to 13 of a half Ironman, or even a standalone weekend half marathon that's a big thing for you, and you just go, this is really freaking hard, but I'm goal driven and I'm trying to maximize performance. I want you to think back and ask yourself, what's the actual biggest challenge or limiting factor